Okay, you can actually kind of run in these. It's not that bad. So over the summer, I got way more time to work on whatever creative project I wanted without any imposed guidelines by a teacher for a grade. And with that freedom, I've gotten the sudden urge to create something way outside of my skill level. What you're watching right now is a documentation of me trying to make that prop. For some background, so you know where I'm coming from when I was working on this prop, I have never cosplayed in my life. The most I've done is dress up for Halloween. I've always been a little too scared to actually cosplay. My background in prop making is very limited. I've made some props for Halloween and like 2 plays, and that's kind of it. So I have no experience with contact cement or EVA foam or how to wear a respirator or how to make giant mechanical hands. I've always pushed the idea of actually doing cosplay or prop design for cosplay away for a few reasons. Like, what if my costume isn't good enough? What if it's not accurate enough? What if I can't actually make a cosplay and I'm just straight up not skilled enough? And I know someone will call me cringe because, God forbid, someone do something that they love. The first time I ever remember being interested in creating a prop was when I ran across a video by SKS Props. It's the one with him making a Chainsaw Man mask, and I thought that was cool as hell. Like, he was using fake blood and whatever the hell contact cement was, and more fake blood, and I was sold. I was there. After I watched that video, everything was cosplay. Like, Instagram was cosplay, YouTube was cosplay, Pinterest was cosplay, or at least props. It was just everywhere. I bring up YouTube specifically because the biggest reason that I'm actually making this is because of a YouTuber called Sarah Spaceman. After watching some of her videos, something clicked for me, and I was like, you know what? I want to do that. So I'm kind of doing that. I'm not actually going to make an entire cosplay, not at this moment. I'm just going to be making the weapon of a character, because prop making is a little more my skill set, just slightly, compared to sewing and other cosplay things. So we're sticking with the props for right now, but maybe that'll change in the future. So after I decided that I wanted to make a prop for a character, I then had to decide whose weapon I wanted to steal. My criteria for picking a character's weapon was, number 1, the prop had to spark joy for me. I had to really, really want it. I was about to sink hours into it, possibly weeks into it. I wasn't really sure. It needed to be something that I absolutely loved. Number 2, I wanted it to be a medium to large weapon. Think Dragon Slayer, think, I forgot her name. I don't remember what she's from. She's these giant scissors. Point is, giant weapon. Lastly, it had to be a signature weapon for that character. So something that they're like always carrying or they're fighting with, or that's a big part of the plot, something like that. So with those criteria, I started trying to brainstorm characters. And my first thought was a One Piece character because there's so many characters in One Piece. I was like, one of them has to have a weapon that I can do, right? The weapons either outside of my skill level right now, or they're not giant weapons, so that's kind of off the table, unfortunately. So with One Piece off of the playing field, I decided instead to scroll through like the list of shows that I've finished and then go to Pinterest and look up characters from those shows that I like and then see if I could get any weapons from that list. I decided on Vi's weapon from Arcane, the Atlas Gauntlets. I chose the gauntlets because they look super fun to make. They are in fact a large weapon, and she does in fact fight with them a lot. So it hit the 3 criteria that I wanted. It also hit another thing that I was looking for, which was it looked doable. I know that giant moving metal hands with lights doesn't really look doable on paper for someone who's never even touched EVA foam. But okay, here's the thing. They look like a challenge that I could break into smaller sections. So like, maybe I spend a week on just making the fingers, and then a week on just painting, etc. I also felt like there were enough elements that I could use the gauntlets as a way to go through a crash course of sorts. So I would have to use a lot of different skills and tools, and that would get me used to working with all of them. So in the future, if I have projects where like, oh, I need to work with these kind of lights, I already have. Now that I picked my character, I just had to figure out how the hell I was going to get them to work. First thing I did once I picked the gauntlets to work on was look for references everywhere. I decided to base the gauntlets off of the show version and not the game version because I don't play the game. So I liked the animation and the story for Arcane. I don't really like the game. I'm sorry. So we're basing it off the show. Although I did use some photos from the game to work out the scale that I wanted the gauntlets to be at. Mostly references from the show and a few from the game. Once I had a solid amount of references, I started working on making a list of materials that I needed to create the gauntlets out of. I remembered some cosplayers mentioning EVA foam, so I looked up how to work with that and how a heat gun works and how to glue it and everything like that. Once I felt as educated as a cosplayer kindergartner, I started hatching my plan for how I was going to assemble the gauntlets. My loose plan was to break everything into small sections that I could work on so I wouldn't feel too overwhelmed. Those sections were the fingers, the solid underlayer of the gauntlet, the sides, the front panels, and the back panels. I also realized later in the project I wanted to add lights on the gauntlet, so we'll throw lighting in there as a category too. As for what materials I decided to use, I settled on EVA foam, pool noodle, cardboard or chipboard, cord, spring bolts, LED strips, and a godly amount of hot glue and contact cement, as well as a generous amount of hopes and prayers. Okay, so that's the plan, that's materials, that's the prop. Let's get started. I started trying to make the fingers first because I thought doing the mechanical portion first was a decent idea. That's something not artistically related at all. It's something I have no idea how to even start. I don't know anything. So I started with that first because if I could get over that hurdle, I figured the rest would be a little bit easier. I started by looking up what I now know are called articulated hands. Throughout my research, I realized I have a severe lack of 3D printer because almost every video I checked on how to make articulated hands was print the pieces with your 3D printer, which is a little presumptuous because I don't have a 3D printer. But I found some other methods other than the 3D printed pieces approach. I also saw people who used spring bolts and string, so shout out to FNAF cosplayers for saving my ass when making these. To get the fingers and the gauntlets to work, I couldn't use the same exact approach as other people did, so I couldn't use the 3D printed idea all the way. I could take some mechanical elements, but not the pieces. And for the FNAF cosplayer, I could use the spring bolts and cord that they suggested, but I couldn't use the foam that they suggested. So instead of using just one or the other, I kind of took both and smushed them together. I decided that I would use spring bolts and cord and foam, but I also wasn't just gonna leave them out and uncovered. I was gonna put something over it. I decided to use pool noodle to create the fingers because I didn't want to drop a ton of money on EVA foam when I wasn't even really sure if I wanted to use EVA foam for the fingers. They're these tiny little sections, and cutting that many pieces out of EVA foam that when I could just cut a pool noodle in half did not make sense to me. Also, weight was a pretty big concern for me because these are giant gauntlets and I am not a very strong person, which means they need to be as light as possible. So I figured the pool noodle would be slightly lighter than EVA foam. After messing up a few times and trying to puzzle my way through creating fingers with no real guide, I settled on cutting the pool noodles in half, flattening them a bit, sticking them together, and sandwiching everything with cardboard for added stability. Initially, I thought that to make space for the spring bolts, I would have to cut squares out by hand for each spring bolt, but turns out the tip of a very hot glue gun can just melt through the plastic. So that actually turned out to be something easier in this project than I thought it would be, which did not happen a lot. So my strategy turned into taking a section of the finger and making a hole in it with the hot glue gun, putting glue in there, and then shoving a spring bolt in. So because I didn't think of a way to get the cord through there, my first strategy, there are many, but this is the first one, was to take a tapestry needle and put the cord through it, and then just kind of shove it through the foam, which in theory works, yes, and it did. The cord comes out the other side, and I go, great, this will work. And then I realized that it won't move smoothly because it's just scraping against foam. So I had to take the tops off of everything and reline all of the channels for the cord with cardboard because they need to actually be able to move smoothly or they're just gonna get stuck. It had been such a pain getting all of these little finger segments to work that I was really disappointed, and I had to undo all of my sections to do more work. It was not a great moment, but this is why you plan things, and I'm glad I learned this early on. I'd made 3 sections for each finger and then 2 sections for the thumb, and I had to open up and cut apart every single one, so that was not a good time. After that roadblock, I finished the fingers, it was fine, I put them all back together, we were good, we're moving on. The next day I decided to attach all of the finger segments together. This time, when I put the cord through, it was through smooth channels lined with cardboard, it was all good, I'd fixed it, figured it out, happy about it. The way that I attached all the finger segments together was by taking one segment and then putting the string through, and then putting the respective spring bolt between the 2 pieces together, and then repeating that. So then I would put the string through and then spring bolt. I didn't attach the spring bolt at the very bottom though, like the one that'll serve as like the knuckle, because there wasn't a hand to attach it to yet. It's just these 2 segments. The second I was done with the first finger, I started like trying to get it to work. And when I pulled the string, it actually worked, as I didn't think that my haphazard, non-existent plan was going to work, but it did. So, haha. So I assembled all the fingers, but what I haven't mentioned is their lovely appearance. Yeah, they were really ugly. You could see the layers of pool noodle and then cardboard in between. They were not looking even close to being done. Right after celebrating, oh yay, the finger worked, I had to think, oh, how am I gonna clean them up now? I completely forgot about this, but to fill in some of the gaps on the side of the fingers, I tried to use patching plaster. Like, it was just sitting out in my workspace, and I thought, well, I'll give it a try, right? Like, it's designed to fill cracks. No, I put some on just like on a test one, and it just cracked off because it's patching plaster. It doesn't work. So in case you were thinking of using it, don't. I don't know, I thought it was really light, it's easy to scrape on, it's like, I can sand it afterwards. It's perfect. It's not perfect, it doesn't work. So instead, I opted to wrap them once in Gorilla Tape, and then again in electrical tape to get rid of some of the texture from the Gorilla Tape, which is how I got the fingers to look all like smooth and cohesive and not like pool noodle and cardboard. So at the end of finishing the fingers, I thought, oh man, I've already done something that I didn't think I could do. Now the only stuff I have to do is cut and glue some foam. This is gonna be easy, right? Wrong. That was stupid. I realized, oh, wait a minute. I don't even have a pattern for these gauntlets. I have to make a pattern for these gauntlets. I have never patterned anything in my life before. I also didn't do research on how to pattern anything at all because I figured, well, what advice would someone who's trying to sew a circle skirt give me for patterning that's applicable to patterning giant hands? So I just opted to do no research, which is not a good strategy, but it's what I did. I went into Procreate and I made a broken down version of the hands with the underlayer and then the panels. The thing that made this kind of difficult was the references I had were either poorly lit or from the side or weird angles, so getting just a flat image of the gauntlets that was well lit was kind of a pain. I broke down what the front and back looked like first and figured I'd just worry about the sides later because they're kind of a mess of pipes and other little steampunky things, so I figured I'd just burn that bridge when I got to it. After I had those broken down drawings in Procreate, I got to the actual patterning part. I used tracing paper to get the measurements I wanted from my hand to my arm, and then I just stared at references for probably a good 30-45 minutes trying to figure out what the scale was going to be. After editing my measurements and the scale a little bit and like tweaking it until I was happy, I switched to staring at a mix of my broken down references and references from the show. I made 2 main underlayer pieces and then broke those 2 pieces up into smaller panels that would go on top of them later. I created a total of 11 pieces for the front and only 3 panels for the back. Off a whim, I decided to try to make a pattern for the sides, which I completely scrapped later and just looked at a reference from the show and then made the pipes and other steampunk stuff on there from just reference. Making all these pieces gave me probably more confidence than it should have, because looking at all of my hopefully nicely patterned pieces, I was like, dang, maybe I can do this because I just have to cut some stuff out now. The plan for the actual gauntlet portion was to create like a solid underlayer that would encase my hand and hide all of the wiring from the hands.
Wow.
And then I would put all the panels and details over top. This way I had more stability and no chance that people would see like my wiring or my hands on the inside of the gauntlet. Then I ordered EVA foam, the mythical cosplay thing that everyone talks about. So I got EVA foam and then contact cement and a respirator. When the foam finally arrived, I traced all of my pattern pieces and then started cutting all of them out with a little bit of editing. I learned how to cut foam and not cut myself, which was good. So once I cut all of my pieces out, I sorted them into what gauntlet they were going to. So pile for left, pile for right, and then a pile for the front and a pile for the back, so 4 piles. And I saved every scrap of foam because I wasn't sure if I was going to need extra or I need to redo a panel. That was a good thing because I had to kind of scrap some stuff later and then like re-glue it on there. I did a little bit of grafting. And then I did a glue test with contact cement just because I'd never used it before, just to see how it would work. After I did my test, I went ahead and glued all of my underlayer pieces together, except for the top or the palm because I hadn't installed the fingers yet, and I figured I'd make it like a sandwich, so I would do the bottom and sides and then put the fingers on and then close it in. I wanted the palm to be removable so I could get to my wiring just in case anything went wrong. I did a kind of test fitting. It was very chaotic. Okay, so this is a very jank way of securing this, but this is what I have so far. Just doing a little test to see if I want it to be a little smaller. Before I put all the fingers in, I want to make sure this is where I want it. And I think I'll look at references again, but I think I might make it a little bit smaller because then I have to add fingers and everything, which is going to make it even taller. I realized I made 2 problems for myself. First is I cut a solid bar where I wanted the fingers to go, which is dumb because then the spring bolts can just move around. I need like little sections for the spring bolts to go in. And second, I hadn't left a space for the string to go through. So I had a space for the spring bolts and no space for string. To solve the string problem, I took a box cutter and shoved it through the layer of cardboard and foam to create a little slit, and then I made that slit like a little bit bigger and then lined it with duct tape to make sure that the string could slide easily. Now that those problems were solved, I could put the string through and actually start installing the fingers. So this was my highly scientific method of installing the fingers. I would put the string through and then hold it out of the way, and then put tons of hot glue in the gap, then put the spring bolt in the gap, and then hold said large amounts of hot glue until it dried. And then once it was dry, I would add more on just to make sure it would stay. Once I had the fingers attached, I had to figure out how I was going to get them to move. I cycled through a few ideas. I initially thought that I could tie the string to rings and then just put my finger through the rings and pull. But when I tried doing that, it hurt my fingers really bad, and also if I let go, they would just slide off, and then finding the rings again inside the gauntlet without being able to see them was really difficult and just more hassle than it was worth. The other idea I had was to use gardening gloves and cut a hole through the gardening gloves and then tie a little knot inside and then super glue it. The only issue was the gloves that I used as a test did not have enough stability, and when I tried to pull down, the string would like take half an inch of the glove backwards with it, which meant it was really difficult to actually get the fingers to move. Instead, I went and I bought a new pair of gloves that were a little more structured. I poked a hole through the fingertip of the glove and then pulled the string through the inside, and then I like flipped the finger out and tied the string around a jump ring, and then glued the knot and the jump ring to the inside of the finger of the glove and then flipped it back to normal. The ring would give the glove stability while the glove made sure that the ring wouldn't go anywhere, so the best of both worlds. Taking a quick break from the mechanical stuff, let's talk about the details on the knuckles. I first cut out just some circles of foam, and then I cut out a slightly wider circle of cardboard to put the foam on top of, so I had a nice little sandwich. And I cut more cardboard out to be the little details on the top of the knuckles, that's like the circle and then the two lines. And then I glued all those pieces together, but I didn't have a place for the knuckles to rest on, so I took some scrap pool noodle and filled in a gap along the side of the gauntlet that I could then glue the knuckles onto. And then I just smacked them on there. Well, actually, I realized that I made them a little bit too big, but I didn't want to redo them, so I just kind of like trimmed it a little bit. And then I smacked them on there. Now, the fingers are attached. The wiring is done. The knuckles have some detailing. Now I get to play with them, right? Wrong, because my dumbass forgot to actually put restraints so I could pick up the gauntlets. So figuring out the restraints, much like the rest of this project, was chaotic, and I had to try a lot of different things to get it to work. I settled on placing 3 restraints along the gauntlets. The first and the widest would fit right here, so right near my elbow. The second was right around my wrist, near the glove, and then the third one was across my palm. My first thought was to make the restraints out of Velcro so I could like tighten and loosen them whenever I wanted. The only issue is it's really difficult to get that to work with the gloves. It was too much of a pain, and if I pulled too hard, the Velcro would just come off. So instead, I used duct tape to create straps. I put 2 pieces of duct tape facing each other, sticking together like this, and then I put a third strip over the top that was slightly longer, so there was a little bit of adhesive poking out, and then I placed them wherever I wanted the restraints on my arm, adhesive straight down, just to make sure that they're where I wanted them, and then I took a staple gun and I stapled them all down. So, after all of that, I can now actually pick up the gauntlets with movable fingers, but I really didn't like how the sides looked so barren. Plus the Velcro I ordered to close up the back hadn't arrived yet, so let's talk about the sides. I broke the sides into a few different pieces: the triangles, the squares, the pipes, the gears, and the bars. In my reference photos, I could only see one side, and I wasn't sure if the other side was the same way. So instead I followed what I saw from the reference pictures on one side, and for the other I kind of just did my own thing. For the side where I followed the reference pictures, I already had the triangles assembled, but they needed the indents. So I just took a dotting tool and just kind of scraped out indents until they looked how I wanted. The squares were already assembled, I just needed to cut a hole in the top so a pipe could come out of it. At first I thought I could use actual PVC pipe, but it was too heavy, and also I didn't have any that was the right size, and I wasn't gonna go get more. So I fell back on my best friend and get out of jail free card, cardboard. I rolled up a few different size tubes. It took a deceptively long amount of time before settling on one that I liked. I added a cap on one side, and then another smaller circle on top of that. I made another smaller tube to go inside of that. Also, all of the tubes that I made are 2 layers of cardboard just for stability. After I was done making the tubes, I went back to the squares, and then I could actually cut out the circles at the top of them for the tube to come out of. And then I created the little gear things on the side. I'm not really sure what they're supposed to be, and I just had the bar piece left, which was a double layer strip of cardboard, and then 2 thinner double layer strips of cardboard on either side. After I had all those pieces, I glued the bar to the gear thing, and then the gear thing to the side, and then I glued the rest of the detailing on. At this point, since I had already completed one side, I had a much better idea of what I was going to do with the side that I had no reference picture of. I used the same first 2 pieces, so the triangle and the square, but I had to remake them out of scraps of foam and cardboard because I hadn't thought of making the other side for some reason. Just hadn't thought about pre-cutting it for the other side. After those 2 pieces, the designs are completely different. This time, the square piece just had one small tube coming out of it, but then like a little antenna coming out of it because I thought it would be funny and cute and easier than making another tube. And then it had 2 gears and then 2 bars. And then bada bing, bada boom, glued all that on. Both of the sides for both of the gauntlets were done. Now, something that was still bugging me, despite having these beautiful, lovely, slightly detailed sides done, was that the back was still completely open. I discovered, in the process of making these, a wonderful product that I wish I knew existed sooner, and that is Velcro tape. You can get big rolls of Velcro tape, and it's amazing. Also, I got industrial strength Velcro tape. It's groundbreaking. I know it's kind of nerdy to care about this, but I think it's cool, okay? It's so convenient. This was honestly the easiest part of the project so far. All I had to do was cut out strips of Velcro, then take the back panel for the gauntlet and line that with Velcro, and then stick it on. So now the palm or back piece sticks to the back of the underlayer, meaning that if I want to take it off and fix my wiring or get my hand out easier, I can now do that. So I could now pick up the gauntlet with both of the sides done and the back covered, so here's clips of me enjoying that. So I ran upstairs to do like a test try on with one of the gauntlets. I accidentally broke something. They're not looking too bad though. Like the sides, I thought were gonna take forever and they were such a pain, but I'm pretty happy with how they're looking. So that's pretty cool. The thing is, it's a little clunky still, so I just used the spring bolts. This is my favorite thing that I can do with this. Let's go. I have to do all these freaking rivets out of hot glue. Okay, that was a lot of detailing, but now all I have to do is glue the panels on. The panels that I've forgotten to add any details on. And after that, I had to figure out a way to do lights. Then I had to seal the whole thing, and then I had to paint it. And then I had to seal it again. And oh god, I'm not even halfway. Maybe I can't do this. Aggressive fear of failure aside, I was determined to get this project to work. I was like, you know what? I'll just sit down, I'll break it into even smaller chunks of work so I don't get overwhelmed. Yes, this did make things seem like a lot more tasks, but I also got to check off a lot more things, which made me feel like I was making more progress. I also decided to just go ahead and get some beveled edges off of Blick because I was like, you know what, I'm not cutting this. This is a product that exists. So while I waited for that to ship, I decided to do the detailing for the rest of the panels that didn't need beveled edges. Although making all of the detailing was pretty dang tedious, I actually managed to finish all of it before the beveled edges even showed up. I glued all the cardboard details on, and then I glued the beveled edges on with contact cement. I got through a lot of ghost files and puppet history while doing this. Now that the front panels are all assembled and almost ready to go, I decided to switch my focus to something else, the lights. The Atlas Gauntlets have blue crystals in them, but in the show, they act more like lights. And since I'm basing these off the show, I opted for the lights idea. Now, I like learning new skills. I like learning new things. It's fun, but at this point I'd learned a lot of new skills and a lot of new things, and I was not going to sit and learn how to solder things, so instead I bought LED strips off of Amazon for 12 bucks. Once I figured out how the lights worked, which took a little bit of time because they came with one questionably translated slip of paper, I started making channels for the lights. So I decided the lights would need to go through this like diamond piece and then down the channel into the circle piece. Then I made the channels for the lights on either side with cardboard, just like stacked together and then put sideways. These were not easy pieces to make, Then I decided that before trying to wire all of my pieces, I was going to try and make covers first. I didn't want to use glass because I figured that was breakable and I didn't have a lot of just spare plastic that was sturdy lying around. So instead, I opted to use shrink plastic. Yes, the kind of plastic that kids use to make little like shrinky dinks and what I make earrings out of. Anyway, so I took shrink plastic and covered the diamond pieces and the channels with it. The only issue with this was getting the scale right, and because I didn't want to do math, I just took an entire sheet of shrink plastic and put it in the oven, and when it came out, I cut it immediately when it was hot with scissors. That was my strategy, and it worked. Not very well, but it worked. Listen, it's kind of an advanced technique, what can I say? The only thing is, it did shatter sometimes, so I would have to like repeat the process, but eventually I got all my shrink plastic pieces. So now I just needed the biggest piece, the big kahuna, if you will. And that's the piece that goes over the circle. Shrink plastic was just not big enough to cover this, so I had to look elsewhere for plastic. In my desperation, I turned to lamination sheets. A lamination sheet inside of another lamination sheet, laminated it, put that in another lamination sheet, laminated it until I had 3 or 4 stacked up, and then I cut out that solid thing of plastic and painted it. Now I have all my lighting pieces and I can actually try and wire these. My incredibly scientific and well thought out method on how to create a hole to put my wiring through is just stab the shit out of this. I was really worried that when I threaded all the lights through that they would break, but they didn't. So next was the actual installation of the rest of the lights. This is where a few sections kind of collide. I glued on all the front panels while doing the lighting. I decided to do this all in one go just to make sure the lights worked with the rest of the panels, like spacing wise. I glued the channels on, and then I folded the lights in between that. I glued the M-shaped piece on, and then like threaded the lights through that, down into the circle piece. I did a little circle, and then once I was sure that that worked, I glued my circle pieces on. So the lights were in, totally fine and successful. The issue actually was with 2 of the top panels. There was a little bit too much excess, more than I had accounted for. This actually turned out to be a good thing though, because I hadn't checked reference images before starting to glue these on, which was a bad move, but thankfully my stupidity actually saved me. In pictures, you can see that there's a little bit of an overhang, and I initially hadn't accounted for that. Thankfully, in my stupidity, I could cut the excess and then glue it tilted slightly downwards and fix 2 of my problems without looking like it was ever not intentional. I did most of this standing because sitting was just not super comfortable and I couldn't see what was going on, so I just had to stand. I'd stood and glued and workshopped, but I'd done it. All the panels were on, all the lights were on. After working for like a good 3-4 weeks, maybe a month at this point, it was very satisfying to actually see things starting to look like how you want them to. Before calling it a day, and despite it being so late, I was like, I need to test the lights. I've made all this stuff, I need to see what it looks like. Only 2 more panels. I am so tired. But once I have all of this glued on, then I can glue all of these onto their main gauntlets, then I can go to sleep. So, earlier today, I finally finished putting all of the panels on the gauntlets. So all of that is on there. The only thing I have to do now is kind of go through and clean up and patch things and then seal everything and then paint everything. Really proud with how it's looking so far. I'm excited to paint it. Yay, fun stuff.
Oh boy.
The next morning I got up and ordered a sealant for everything. Instead of using Plasti-Dip, which is meant more for pieces that need to be flexible, I opted for a spray Mod Podge as well as normal Mod Podge just to get like tiny cracks. Then in the meantime, I did like a crumb coat of fixing little weird details just to make sure that any cardboard weirdness or crustiness of the hot glue was like smoothed out as much as I could. It was still very crusty, but just less crusty was the plan. Sealing honestly went really quickly. All I had to do was just spray stuff down, make sure I didn't miss anywhere, and just kind of like paint in the gaps a little bit with Mod Podge, and then I was good to start painting. Now, I definitely underestimated how long painting would take. I thought, I'm pretty good at painting, I enjoy painting, I can spend hours doing this, but like, it'll go quickly. It did not go quickly. I wasn't sure where to start. Like, I was so overwhelmed with how much needed to be painted that I didn't know where to start, so I would like bounce from painting with bronze to painting with silver to painting with gold to painting with blue, when I should have really just done everything blue, everything bronze, everything silver, etc. But I learned that on the second gauntlet. Oh, something else that's important to mention. I looked at reference pictures to get like the exact color that I wanted. I settled on like cobalt blue, I forget the number, but it was like the perfect shade. It was exactly what I wanted. And I got it as a spray paint because I figured, oh, I can just tape off what I don't want blue and then I can just spray them, thinking most of the gauntlet is blue. I don't know why I thought that, because most of the gauntlet is not blue. Most of the gauntlet is gold or like bronze, and only small parts of the panels are blue. So I was still stuck with this spray paint, and I figured I would just make the most of it and use it. So I took like a little paper bowl and just put a bunch of spray paint in it and just used a brush. So I just painted with spray paint, but not the way that you're supposed to. It was the right color of paint and it worked, and there were no brush strokes in it. So that's a bonus. But if you see me taking spray paint and putting it in a bowl and then using a brush, that is why. Painting honestly was fun, but also brutal because it felt like I was making no progress. I had to do multiple coats of every color, and there were so many small areas that needed painting that every time I thought, man, I've painted most of this, I would flip it over and realize, oh, no, I'm not even halfway. There is so much I have to do. And then when I finished one gauntlet, I would just bring up the other one and look at how there was no paint on it and just kind of die inside. I got through a lot of One Piece, but you know, that's a win. At a certain point while painting, I realized that the gauntlets were as good as they were gonna get. Like, they're not gonna be perfect. There's going to be little areas where it's like not quite right, and I was just gonna have to be okay with it. I could be working on it forever. So instead, I decided, you know what? I'm just gonna be done. I'll just go seal them. It's a great angle. Anyway, I have to just shake this for like an eternity, and then hopefully get started on sealing these. I already did the fingers, but then I ran out, so. All right, I've covered them twice with this, so I've hit them with 2 coats. Now we wait for them to dry. Hopefully tomorrow morning I can actually take pictures of these. Yay! I'm driving later than expected, but it's like a Sunday. It's 6 o'clock. There should be like no one. Please. I'm here. I am sweaty as hell. It is hot, and wearing pants was a mistake, but it looks cool, which is nice. Also, there's people here, which is kind of weird, but you know. I'm gonna go to a lower level because I can, and I'm gonna try and get a few more pictures. You know what happened right after I showed up? One of the knuckles broke. So that's kind of funny how that works, but at least it's pretty. All right, lower level. Hopefully gonna get some actual pictures that are decent. I don't really know what they look like, but we'll find out.
I have a genius idea.
It won't make sense for a minute.
Okay, you can actually kind of run in these. It's not that bad. So we all know what the normal one looks like, right? I'm using germs. I'm very pleased with this, honestly. I just love that I can like it's fun, zooming.
In the city and I'm lurking 63rd. If the brothers on the island, then I think you know the word. All the risky in the luggage and it's going to a third. Everybody in the area ain't messing with the herd.
Honestly, it feels surreal that I actually took something from a game and somehow turn it into a real thing that I can hold and carry around and run with. They are far from perfect. They are crusty. They are very handmade looking, but I made them and I'm proud of that. I tried and I failed as many times as it took to get things to function how they were supposed to. I would do a million things differently if I were to make these again, but I'm still proud that I finished this project and didn't quit halfway through. I'm sure someone will call this cringe, and I'm sure people will make fun of me for not actually playing League and just basing this off of the show, which is okay. You can do that, that's fine. Honestly, at the end of the day, I'm just happy that I got this prop to work. This also makes me want to try to make like a full cosplay, not just a weapon, and I may already have a plan in the works, so stay tuned for what I hope is an easier project. Thank you for stopping by and watching this whole process. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but thank you for watching however long this was. And if you're someone with experience making props and you had to watch this, I am so sorry. Do consider subscribing if you like the vibe here and want to see more of whatever I decide to do. Doing this project was kind of weird for me because I was very apprehensive about it. I just felt stupid the whole time, like why am I making this? Who even cares? But that's just it. Who cares? It's for fun. It's for me. Whatever. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!